Dragan Dabic worked in a private clinic outside of a Belgrade suburb, sporting a long white beard and disheveled graying hair. Living in an apartment near the Serbian capital, he wore large, thick-framed glasses and preached about holistic practices and alternative medicines. He spoke at conferences and even on television about the importance of natural remedies and how to properly take care of your body. All of that would have been commendable had he not been lying to everyone around him the entire time. His name wasn't Dragan Dabic. His name was Radovan Karadzic, and he had been hiding in Serbia in plain sight for 12 years. My name is Hedija Spahalic, and this is Unsafe Haven. This episode will go over the aftermath of the Srebrenica massacre. Once their mission was complete and the Chetniks had killed as many Bosnian men and boys as they could, they immediately began devising a plan to cover it all up. Mass graves containing the bodies of tens and sometimes hundreds of Bosnian men and boys were dug, and then redug in the following days and weeks. The initial indictments against Karadzic and Mladic came at the end of July 1995 by the UN.
How would you assess today's situation in and around Srebrenica?
Mainly it is under control of Serbian troops. The terrorist elements may cause further troubles, but people, civilians, as well as UN personnel are completely safe and secure.
What's going to happen with the Muslim civilians?
Muslim civilians are free to stay or to leave. It's going to be something like in Western Slavonia, but without carnage that has been committed in Western Slavonia. Simply,
Karadzic defended his decision to take over Srebrenica through any means necessary. A few months later, the war would end with the signing of the Dayton Agreement. However, it was far from over still.
The presidents of Serbia, Bosnia, and Croatia signed a peace agreement this afternoon ending the 43-month-long war in Bosnia. We'll bring you reactions from...
Mladic and Karadzic were now in the wind, both men and others who helped facilitate the genocide in Srebrenica, such as Momcilo Krajisnik, president of the Republika Srpska National Assembly, and Radislav Krstic, the VRS Drina Corps chief of staff, were brought up on war crimes by The Hague. The International Criminal Tribunal for the Former Yugoslavia, or ICTY, was formed by the United Nations to specifically deal with the war crimes perpetrated in the Balkans during the war.
In July 1995, General Krstic individually, you agreed to evil. And this is why, today, this trial chamber convicts you and sentences you to 46 years in prison.
Krstic was the first one to be convicted of genocide at the ICTY in 2001, and he was later sentenced to 46 years in prison. He is currently serving his sentence at a prison in Poland, but he is eligible for early release. Krajisnik, another member of the Joint Criminal Enterprise, was found guilty and convicted in 2006.
The Chamber finds you guilty on the following counts. Count 3. Persecution as a crime against humanity. Count 4. Extermination as a crime against humanity. Count 5. Murder as a crime against humanity. Count 7. Deportation as a crime against humanity. And Count 8. Forced transfer as an inhumane act as a crime.
Now, he was originally sentenced to 27 years, but that would be later reduced to 20 in 2009. Krajisnik would be granted an early release in 2013 after serving just 7 years for murder, deportation, extermination, and forcible transfer. He would later die of COVID-19 in 2020. But Mladic and Karadzic were still nowhere to be found. Both men had been indicted on charges for committing inhumane acts and atrocities. Their infamy made them heroes among certain powerful Serbian communities. Songs were sung in their honor. Monuments and murals memorializing them and their crimes were erected to mock the victims of Srebrenica and Bosnia in general. The psychological effects of the war and what followed had an immense impact on survivors. Dr. Esad Boškajlo is a Bosnian psychiatrist and war survivor himself. He was captured and in several different concentration camps over the course of the Bosnian War.
PTG first. People who survive trauma, based on, all saying what doesn't kill you make you stronger, is make you feel more appreciative of freedom, appreciate your family, society, science, your position, your friendship, life in general, justice, and humanity, even religious, so these people become, most people become better people. That's PTG. Unfortunately, 20% develop PTSD, and those symptoms are divided in 4 categories.
His first-hand experience, along with his clinical expertise, gives him a unique perspective when treating his patients, many of which were Bosnian war survivors themselves.
This group of symptoms that people with trauma experience is called re-experience. You re-experience trauma by thinking about it, by imaging, having images in the brain, by nightmares, by bad dreams.
Pa posle rata utjecaja imalo je na mene, ja sam koristio lijekove za smirenje nekih 6 mjeseci. Ja sam imao svaku noćnu moru i ulici da sam plakao, da sam nekad i svoju ženu da...
After the war, I was on pills to calm my nerves for about 6 months. I had every kind of nightmare imaginable. I cried. I would accidentally hit my wife with my hand in my sleep. 6 months I went to a psychiatrist and I was taking medications. It was really terrible because everything comes before your eyes. You fall asleep and you see everything and you get scared.
The second one is a group of symptoms we call hyperarousal. Those symptoms are basically when we think about it or when we feel what happened to us, we can feel heart rate increase, cannot sleep, cannot concentrate, sweating, difficulty breathing, like panicking, anxiety. It's kind of anxiety part.
The war had significant effects on soldiers and civilians alike.
Pa što se tiče mene, na mene utjecaj imao veliki. Ja sam imao negdje oko 15 godina, za 15 godina preživjeti to sve u potočarima.
For me, it had a big effect. I lived through all of that at 15 years old, seeing everything happening in Potocari and how they were separating everyone. Boys younger than me were left behind, and I was lucky enough to get through with my mom and 2 sisters.
Called negative symptom of PTSD or depressive symptom. People can be depressed, sad, unhappy. They don't see future. People who survive trauma and who develop PTSD, they are not able to see future for self. They are stuck in the past.
Mental health is still an incredibly taboo subject in the Balkans. Despite all the horrific things they experienced and witnessed, many are reluctant to admit that they're struggling or suffering as a result of all of it.
Mi smo se žalili, mi smo tražili pomoć, ali nas niko nije nas niko, tako reći, slušao.
We were looking for help, but no one was listening to us or trying to help us. Everyone was promising things, but no one came with what we needed at that time.
Feelings of resentment and abandonment would plague many Bosnians following the war. They felt betrayed by the UN, by the Dutch, by the world. The Dutch Supreme Court would rule that they were partially responsible for their role in allowing the massacre in Srebrenica to happen. In 2013, the court ruled that the UN Dutch BAT was responsible for the deaths of approximately 350 Bosnian men and boys, who were handed over to the Chetniks by UN soldiers on July 13th, never to be seen again. The court, however, did not find them guilty of cooperating with Serb forces, just for allowing them to take the men and boys from the base. The same base that was supposed to be keeping them safe. The soldiers who were supposed to be keeping them safe handed them over to the people who murdered them. And for almost 20 years, they denied any wrongdoing.
The international community failed to protect the people of Srebrenica. As part of this community, the Dutch government shares political responsibility for the situation in which this failure could occur. We offer our deepest apologies for this.
9 years after the court's ruling, in 2022, the Minister of Defense of the Netherlands would issue the first and only apology related to Srebrenica via X, formerly known as Twitter.
11. juli 1995. godine u Srebrenici se desio genocid, desilo se ubijanje, desilo se silovanja, desilo se logori.
July 11th, 1995, a genocide occurred in Srebrenica. Murders occurred, rapes occurred, things that you can't even imagine occurred to people and a nation. There was an extermination warning that we were going to disappear as Muslim people, as Bosnian Muslim people in that part of the world.
Accountability. That is what the people of Bosnia wanted. For someone to be held responsible for the war crimes committed against them. For the world to recognize that what happened to them was real and it was painful.
Well, international prosecutors said today they would press for a speedy trial for Radovan Karadzic, arrested in Belgrade yesterday and charged with some of the worst atrocities since World War II, stemming from the war in Bosnia in the early 90s. The hunt for Karadzic lasted more than 10 years, was worthy of a James Bond movie. And where was he found? Hiding in plain sight.
The ICTY would find him guilty of 1 out of 2 counts of genocide and several crimes against humanity, including murder, extermination, and forcible transfer in 2016. 3 years after Karadzic was found, the 4th and final man would be captured.
On behalf of the Republic of Serbia, I announce that today we arrested Ratko Mladic. Extradition process is underway. This is the result of full cooperation of Serbia with the Hague Tribunal.
Ratko Mladic had been hiding in Serbia, also under an assumed name, Milorad Komadic. He openly lived in the Serbian capital for years after the war, going out in public freely and frequently, attending sports events and visiting local cafes, until the year 2000. International pressure on the Serbian government to find and arrest him had been increasing, and Mladic dropped out of the public eye following this. After 14 years on the run, he would eventually be found and arrested in his cousin's house in the Serbian village Lazarevo in 2011. A sticker on the road sign leading into the village celebrates the fact that Mladic chose their village to be his home prior to his arrest. Someone even suggested putting a plaque outside the cousin's house commemorating him and his arrest. Others wanted to rename the village after him. Mladic is a Serbian hero with few critics.
Security, please escort Mr. Mladic out of the courtroom. Could Mr. Mladic...
His trial was tedious and filled with outbursts from the now convicted war criminal. His proceedings would come to a close in 2017.
For having committed these crimes, the chamber sentences Mr. Ratko Mladic to life imprisonment.
Although the ICTY and many around the world have recognized the fact that these men and the Serbian government were guilty of committing genocide, a new problem arose.
I'm talking about attempt to genocide denial. People who are trying to deny genocide, it's also painful for them to accept it. And even for people who never did anything in Srebrenica, for the rest of Serbian people, it's painful for them to see this is what our people did, including my relatives, or including their relatives, or people they know, or their parents or grandparents. It's very painful. Think about it. How would I accept that, hey, my father was doing something? It's very painful.
A study was conducted and released earlier this year by the Academy for Democratic Development and the Center for Civic Engagement in Podgorica, Montenegro, asking, did a genocide happen in Srebrenica? 52% of Serbian citizens believe that a genocide did not happen in Srebrenica. 32% aren't sure or don't have an opinion, and only 16% said yes, a genocide did happen in Srebrenica.
They do. They use, it's so interesting, they use the most powerful and sophisticated way to try to deny that. And when they don't have ability to deny, because there is no such things, they are attacking credibility of the witnesses.
Every year, on July 11th, thousands gather in Srebrenica to pray for the victims and to bury new ones that are found. Occasionally, some Serbians will try to disrupt this mourning by putting up disrespectful billboards in and around the town, playing Serbian war songs loudly and mocking the victims and their families.
Znači, ne smijemo zaboraviti šta nam se desilo, oprostiti nećemo I moramo biti na oprezu uvijek da nam se tako nešto ne dogodi ponova.
We cannot forget what happened to us. We will not forgive them, and we have to always be aware so that something like this doesn't happen to us again anywhere in our Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Survivors stress the importance of talking about Srebrenica and worry about history repeating itself.
Imaju da vide, imaju snimci, imaju vide, znači trebaju da obrate pažnje, malo više da pregledaju, da ne bi se dešavalo u buduće. Nije bitno kome.
There are things for people to see, videos for them to watch. They need to pay attention so that it doesn't happen in the future. It doesn't matter to who and it doesn't matter where, so that this doesn't happen anymore. So that people and children don't pay for it.
I'm Hedija Spahalic, and this has been the third and final part of Unsafe Haven.